Hello, everyone. Welcome to Historically Speaking, an online YouTube history channel focused on the history of various institutions and professionals, how history intersects with education, culture, gender, and the world around us. I'm Karen Yang, host of Historically Speaking. Today, we are here with Shelley Zalis, the CEO of the Female Quotient. The Female Quotient is an equality services company that provides a lot of thought leadership platforms for women and develops a lot of solutions for organizations committed to closing the gender gap in the workplace. The Female Quotient has pioneered a lot of really great programs, including the Equality Lounge at Davos conferences and many other conferences as well, and have sparked real change in the workplace. Today, I'm here with Shelley, the CEO of the Female Quotient, who is an internationally renowned thought leader, movement maker, and champion of equality. And she's been a pioneer for online research, becoming the first female chief executive ranked in the research industry's top 25. And today, as the CEO of the Female Quotient, she's worked with Fortune 500 companies to really advance equality in the workplace. And I'm super, super, super grateful to have her here with me today. Shelley, thank you so much for coming on to my channel. Do you have anything else you'd like to add to the bio or to the Female Quotient's kind of mission and statement, I guess?
No, I'm just so thrilled to be here with you. How did you hear about us?
So, while in the process of kind of conducting or searching for a lot of interviews, I was just really interested in seeing a lot of different institutions that I personally never really knew of or heard about, but nonetheless were doing really, really great work. And immediately I noticed, just like through the internet, the Female Quotient's like website and all of this great impact and the kind of like Fortune 500 companies like straight relationship with the Female Quotient, and I was just super intrigued and super interested in just like diving deeper and kind of diving into the behind the scenes of the Female Quotient.
Okay, very
For
good.
sure. And with that, we can totally just like launch into our questions. Um, so my first question has to do with just what kind of discrimination have women or female CEOs faced historically, and whether or not we've kind of overcome these kind of historical forms of discrimination, or whether they still really exist in the present as well.
Well, I just kind of feel like the rules of the workplace were written over 100 years ago by men for men.
Mhm,
And
mhm,
if you think about that concept, it is why women are typically falling out of the workplace, even still
mhm,
today. It's
mhm,
why women in general are paid 80 cents on the dollar,
mhm,
Black women 64 cents on the dollar, Latinas 54 cents on the dollar. And
mhm,
that really is the problem. And when you think about it, we start 50% men, women in the workplace. That's not really the problem. We
mhm,
end at about 17% in leadership. And where we fall off is what I call the messy middle, in middle management. And
mhm,
that's really where women are starting to gain more responsibility at home and more responsibility in the workplace. And
mhm,
I think the biggest problem is caregiving. It's where women are starting to have children.
mhm,
And,
mhm,
and that's where the biggest problem is arising,
mhm,
because
mhm.
caregiving is still predominantly a female responsibility.
100%.
And I think that's really where the majority of the issues arise. And when you think about it, when you're starting to gain more responsibility at work,
Mhm,
one of three things happen. Either
mhm,
women leave the workplace entirely because
mhm,
they can't do it all,
mhm,
or women rise to leadership, and that's where we have that work-life balance issue,
mhm,
or
mhm,
women do what I did, which is start their own business because they want to write their own rules, because the
mhm,
rules of the workplace just don't work for them.
mhm,
And
100%.
so these are the challenges that we're taking on right now, is
Mhm,
what do we do about it?
mhm, mhm,
And that's why historically what we see is it's time to rewrite the rules so that we can make it work for everyone, especially
mhm,
caregivers. And
mhm,
what I always used to say is I left to create the uncorporate rules. And that's how I inherited my nickname, Chief Troublemaker. I had to break all the rules that made no sense and write the new ones, because
mhm,
I no longer wanted to be the exception to the rule. I wanted to create the new rules and the new norms that would
mhm.
work for everyone.
100%. I think this idea of like the messy middle is definitely really interesting, and this is like my first time kind of really hearing this. Could you elaborate on that idea? Like, does the messy middle and like just like is that a reference to women's age, or is it kind of like the messy middle of like management or like a company's position or something like that?
For me, messy middle is a life stage.
Mm-hmm,
And,
mm-hmm,
I start talking a lot about life stage accommodation. We need to
mm-hmm,
create a workplace that would accommodate for life stage. And,
mm-hmm,
life stage for me is around caregiving.
mm-hmm,
And
mm-hmm,
caregiving for me is the biggest challenge in the workplace. And
mm-hmm,
I don't want to say it's a women's issue, because
mm-hmm,
if a man is the primary caregiver, it would be a problem for him as well.
mm-hmm,
Because think
mm-hmm,
about it, if you're the primary caregiver of your children or of your elderly, of your parents or whoever you're taking care of, you
mm-hmm,
can't travel all the time, you can't work the long hours.
mm-hmm,
Someone has to take care of their children.
mm-hmm,
And that's where we start having the challenges.
mm-hmm,
Or if now, even in the pandemic, we're starting to see or hear what we're calling the great resignation. We're
mm-hmm,
losing
mm-hmm,
so many women to, in the workplace right now. So many women are leaving.
mm-hmm,
And this is a big issue. We're losing so many amazing leaders
mm-hmm.
to caregiving.
Yeah, for sure.
And that's a big problem for us.
Mm-hmm,
And if we could just figure out how to retain our
mm-hmm,
greatest talent,
mm-hmm,
which in my opinion are
mm-hmm,
caregivers,
mm-hmm,
caregivers, the greatest talent, in my opinion. What are caregivers? Caregivers are passionate, they're
mm-hmm,
compassionate, caring people. Those
mm-hmm,
are great
100%.
leaders.
Mm-hmm,
Yet we're
mm-hmm,
losing those leaders to caregiving.
mm-hmm,
And
mm-hmm,
so that's what we have to figure out, is how can we retain our greatest leaders today and accommodate around life stage. That's what we
mm-hmm.
need to do. And that's the messy middle.
Yeah, no, I think that's like I really liked how you kind of just elaborated on that idea, in that it's definitely like a life stage. It seems that once you hit a certain age as a woman, you have a bunch of these expectations and a bunch of just like pressure from both society, maybe your own background, or maybe just like your peers as well. And I think the idea of like being able to juggle it all, it seems very nice on the surface, but realistically speaking, that's just not possible. And oftentimes, as you said, these caregivers are truly like the strength and a lot of the driving forces behind a lot of these companies and a lot of these different just sectors that we interact with on the daily. And we don't even realize like their value until they like suddenly quit their jobs or just say that they can't really take this anymore, for sure. My another question I have regarding kind of like the history aspect of female CEOs is, have women CEOs been supported in the past, and like what has the support looked like, I guess?
Yes, listen, I think CEOs, there's always sort of that bias against, or that perception. Let's not put it as a bias. The perception that,
Mhm,
I think this is always so interesting, that women are too bossy, and,
mhm, mhm,
men are, we never say a man is too bossy.
mhm, mhm,
Men are aggressive, and that's okay, but
mhm,
women are too bossy.
mhm,
And men are assertive, but when men are assertive, women are, bossy.
mhm,
Or men, like men get away with those things, right?
mhm,
And I always
mhm,
tell women, we have to stop saying, I'm not too bossy, I'm the boss. Or
mhm,
I'm not too emotional. We always, put these words
mhm,
associated with women,
mhm,
that women are too emotional and women are too bossy,
mhm,
women are too this and women are too that.
mhm,
And for men, they're never anything. They're perfect, right?
mhm, mhm,
Or if women talk about their children, they're
mhm,
distracted. If
mhm,
men talk about their children, oh, they're so adorable. Oh, look at
mhm,
men, they're so adorable. They're so kind because they think about their children. But if women talk about their children, oh, they're distracted, right?
mhm,
I
mhm,
mean,
mhm,
so it's just double standards,
mhm, 100%.
right? And
Mhm,
so these are all of these misperceptions that women are weak and
mhm,
men are strong. Women are distracted, and men, it's like so nice that they think about their children, you know, and these are always the biggest issues. And if you had a man or a woman equally qualified for a job, people will tend to choose the man.
For sure, for sure. Yeah.
And, you know, all of these games that people play that they say, oh, you should change your name on a resume and put a man's name because you're 10 times more likely to choose someone if you think it's a man that you're hiring. I mean, that's nonsense.
Yeah.
Why? Actually, the statistics, you know, every statistic shows that a woman actually is going to do a better job. But
sure.
It's, you know, all of these issues with the bias barriers that kick in. And so this must change. But at the end of the day, we do have the reality that women, back to what I said before, you know, that women are the primary caregivers. And so what must change is the rules of the road. We have to change the rules in the workplace, where we have more flexibility and that we have more, you know, by the way, equal pay for equal work. That has to change. We do need to have, you know, parental leave, and we should have mandatory parental leave, not elective. Because when you have elective parental leave, the woman must take it because our bodies need to have the, you know, maternity leave. But when we have elective paternity leave, men don't tend to take paternity leave. But if we have mandatory parental leave where the men and women must take it, that will create more equality at home and more equality at work.
100%. I really liked the idea that you said that like this double standard again, and that I feel like with the idea of like changing your name on your resume to seem to like be hired or 10 times more like available to be hired, like that also means that women can't authentically really be themselves or authentically really showcase their talents or any of these their interests or any of their values in support of being passed over by a job or something like that. And I definitely think that, as you said, it's a kind of structural change that needs to happen. It doesn't necessarily mean that just like we as our individuals, we all need to push for more structural change, whether that be through pay or through this parental leave. And I think that's definitely really, really important.
But even lexicon matters. Like we have to stop job descriptions. I mean, imagine if I gave a job description that says, we are looking for an aggressive, assertive, linear, analytic CEO. I'm not going to apply for that job. But if I wrote, I'm looking for a compassionate, passionate, emotive, human leader, take me, right? We have to use new language. 100%. I'm not aggressive. This doesn't describe me. Emotive, hello. Sign me up. Contextual, you know, use new language.
100%. And like that also plays into the idea of like the structure and all of just like how we view ourselves and how we view others, just like internally, and just like our relationships with ourselves and how we represent ourselves in the media and in business as well. I wanted to touch on the idea, which I found really, really interesting. I love the equality lounge that the Female Quotient puts out. And I love this idea so much of just like having all of these great conversations through different lenses and with all these different people. Personally, how has highlighting female CEOs and their stories kind of transformed your own view and the business world and like your perception of the business world, I guess?
Wow. So I'm also the co-founder of something called See Her. If you can see her, you can be her. And, you know, first of all, storytelling matters a lot. And you know, visibility is the first part, you know, awareness. So many stories are just not told. And if you don't share the stories of amazing women, you're not going to know the woman, you're not going to see the woman, and you're if you're not seen, you're not heard. If you're not heard, you're never going to be notable. And so notability makes a very big difference. And I think that role models is just so incredibly important.
100%.
And, it's inspiration, it's aspiration. And I think that's how we can, really let other women know it's possibility. I see on your wall, men.
Yeah.
And,
Indiana Jones.
Indiana Jones, but imagine when you start seeing women as heroes and cast in roles of doctors and lawyers and CEOs. When you start seeing women at the head of the table, you start seeing that I can be that too, right? Seeing is believing.
100%.
And that's confidence building. And you say, I can be a doctor. I can be a lawyer. I can be a CEO. I can be a firefighter. I can be anything I can imagine.
100%. For sure.
So incredibly important.
Yeah, as you said, just like representation, and just like I feel like I just noticed that like I had something about See Her, which was like a movement led by the Association of National Advertisers to increase the accurate portrayal of women and girls in advertising and media. I feel like through advertising and media, we can definitely, just like the poster and like the movies and through all of these different just like social media and all this interaction, we can definitely kind of envision ourselves in these roles if we see other people who look like us, who act like us, who have the same values and background as us. And I think that's really, really important. And I'm really glad that you're taking such a huge part in that, for sure.
Karen Yang, are you in high school?
Yes, I am. I'm a junior right now.
I mean, you're hired. You tell me when you want a job. You are fantastic.
No worries. No, I think this is all so interesting for sure. And like, as a student currently who's studying a lot of different like history and who's really fascinated with history and culture and communication and writing, I definitely personally feel like the history that I'm studying in the textbooks doesn't necessarily represent who I am or who my friends look like or just like how we act or anything like that. And I definitely feel that having these like really important conversations to kind of see that we're all still actively working on just like building a wider brand or building a wider like group of representation is definitely super, super important, for sure.
You know how many stories are not written? Not because they haven't been written, but they haven't been told.
Exactly.
And you heard what I just said. It's not because they haven't been written. They haven't been told. They haven't been published. And if they're not published, they can't be read. And we are about to showcase so many stories of women from history. They're stories that have never been shared. And they are brilliant. And it's because, guess who handpicked the stories that were going to be shared?
All these men, for sure. Yeah, exactly. 100%.
And that is why when you think about algorithms, if we have, while algorithms are computations, you still have scientists and programmers and people in the business of science. If we don't have women in the business of science, the algorithms will be flawed because you still have people inputting data.
100%. Exactly. And like the people who tell these stories are the people who decide how the stories are being told, and the people who are putting in the data, it's just like they've always had this one perspective, or they don't necessarily know the perspectives of others. So it's definitely going to come out, the results that come out, whether that be textbooks, programs, or anything else like that, are definitely not representative of a whole, for sure.
Data in, data out, bias in, bias out, gender in, gender out, race in, race out. If you don't have representation making decisions, then you're not going to have proper representation coming out.
For
and
sure.
the algorithm will be flawed.
100%. 100%. To kind of wrap up our conversation today, I have like one more question. Personally, I think that supporting women, female CEOs, and just women in business and in management is super, super important. How do you think like the general public, I guess, can support these CEOs, seeing that a lot of us don't really necessarily have that leverage, or just like might not know what to do to really pave the way for equality, I guess?
Power of the purse.
Oh, wow. Yeah, that's so true. Just like using money and using your own, just like kind of deciding where you spend your income is like a huge force of power of us as well, for sure. 100%.
85% of purchase decisions are made by women. What you watch, how you shop. I mean, consumers have viewers, consumers, fans. Everything is how you vote. People don't realize how much power consumers have in everything they do.
Yeah, okay, that's like a really, really great perspective, for sure. Just like, again, it's kind of the idea of like power in or power, and then the power that comes out. Like, we have the power to determine what we want to input or where we want to spend our money, and that generates the results or lets people know what we think and what we want and how we believe certain things to be true.